Hello, everyone. My name is Moshe Naveh from the SAP Community team. Welcome to our SAP Community Call. Today, we will discuss leverage the advanced OData capabilities of SAP Cloud SDK JavaScript. We have Artem and Marika with us from the SAP Cloud SDK product team. Please feel free to use the Q&A tab to enter your questions, and then Marika and Artem will pause at the end of the call and answer your questions. So Artem, please take it away.
Thanks, Moshe, and a warm welcome from me and Marika to our community call. Thanks for joining. My name is Artem. I'm a product owner of SAP Cloud SDK, and Marika, our lead developer for SDK for JavaScript. I think she'll introduce herself a little bit in details later. And today we decided to take a topic that probably already was in one of our community calls regarding the OData client that we used before for OData v2 for different advanced features like batch and deep operations and some others. And today we want to, let's say, recap it or rerun it with our brand new implementation of OData v4 client, which is the next standard for all the, basically all the SAP services. And before we start, I just want to quickly mention that this is not an official product communication in terms that some features might be in beta or might change at some point. So basically this bulk text just to remind you that please follow the official communication channels and use productively only the features that we are officially released. And I want to kick it off with a quick update and ask you to take around 10 minutes to participate in our survey. We're really keen to know your feedback. And I hope, Moshe, you can confirm that you can now see the link to the survey in the chat so that you can easily access it. You can do it later after the call. The survey is fully anonymous, so your information is protected, and we would really appreciate your participation. Also, please don't mix up Cloud SDK and other SAP products because we want our feedback to be focused. And for example, CAP is also quite popular, but it's different thing. So if you're unsure, please make your informed and make it replies about SAP Cloud SDK. Another topic to briefly touch is update what happened on the Cloud SDK side lately. And yeah, everything all together, we just recently released, and our last community call was about brand new OData client for OData v2 in Java, which is much more efficient now. We also released a couple of libraries like currency conversion, about which we hope to run the next call. So stay tuned, guys. And of course, we have some REST libraries on Java side already released, and we update them regularly, and that already happens to SAP Cloud Platform workflow library. But today we're talking about JavaScript, and that's where things actually are running fast, because since the last time when we just released our OData client general availability, now we have support for advanced operations like batch. We improved their client with making it more flexible, like adding extra headers instead of just content type. So take a look in our docs. We also listen to your feedback and release, for example, count for get all requests because this is quite small but quite important feature in the scope of OData client. And of course, it's deep create and update operations that you can leverage to make more complex CRUD. And also, some configuration topics we also don't leave behind, like muting and unmuting loggers for your convenience and for privacy. And our agenda for today is, it's pretty standard, I think, but also fascinating. We'll just look into our OData client and why we created it, to recap for everyone who might have not yet interacted with SAP Cloud SDK. And then we'll run not a new, but an updated session about how to use advanced features, but in the perspective of OData before. And of course, developers don't believe words, so we'll run a demo for you. And that's by Marika. So let's do a quick recap of SAP Cloud SDK and our current client. And we created it just to solve a very simple problem, as it might seem from very beginning, but we want actually you to write code instead of playing SAP Cloud Bingo and figuring out all the technologies we have in place, and take the best practices from us and quickly release your applications. And maybe that's not a very precise diagram, but that's how your application will look like with SAP Cloud SDK. And in the center of it, of course, your app, and then you can consume different services from some ERP suite like S/4HANA or other applications from the SAP product portfolio, like SuccessFactors and others. And they usually come in the form of OData API and REST APIs. And looking a bit forward, we will soon have something on the REST side, but so far we made a great effort to simplify your life with OData request, which is just another way to do REST, very particular. And I would say, to me, it feels quite complicated if you will do it just from the generic HTTP client. And of course, together with that, we simplify a lot of topics like that help you host your application on SAP Cloud Platform and even on premise. So we'll have you with authentication, connectivity, all the service bindings, and other specifics and abstractions you usually will find an SAP ecosystem. And also to mention that we are living in the 21st century, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't believe you guys release your products without CI/CD, and we bring those best practices through our scaffolding to you, providing you with basic pipeline to deliver your product in a seamless way. Yeah, we also have a CLI, which helps you scaffold that project and interact with the SAP Cloud Platform in a more convenient way. It also provides a little bit of abstractions on top of Nest framework that we use in the background. We also work to simplify some development choices for you. And for example, the language in the, let's say, JavaScript ecosystem that we think you should definitely leverage when developing with SAP is TypeScript, because it's strongly typed. It provides us a chance to deliver you the API via IDE. Like you can discover it basically by autocomplete in your IDE, which Marika will show. Also, it's fully compatible with JavaScript in case you're hardcore guys who are not afraid of any runtime issues. And it's well standardized and supported by other giants like Microsoft. So I think we made this choice a bit more obvious to start your project with. And yeah, the time to recap and look back a little bit and to remind you what OData protocol is. Basically, that's how you currently integrate your application with SAP. So it's a de facto standard in SAP now. And most of the S/4HANA services now expose this kind of APIs. And what we do in Cloud SDK, for those who still might not know that, we release a very nice type-safe client for these services in OData, for OData APIs in S/4HANA. We also provide you with a generator so that for the services you might be releasing yourself or might be not yet covered by pre-generated clients, you can basically generate them yourself. And of course, all of that is very deeply integrated with SAP Cloud Platform, which is quite nice and lets you cover that extra mile. And on the right side, you just see the quite nifty example of how the code would look like with Cloud SDK. And without Cloud SDK, all this presentation wouldn't probably fit it nicely. So to recap how Cloud SDK is built on this types of client side. So we have that layered architecture that probably every app would use. So we have like very basic generic HTTP client, then some more advanced client that already leverages some OData specifics. And on top of that, we provide you with great type safety that TypeScript allows us to do and provide you the OData client. And before that, with JavaScript, you could leverage only OData v2. And from version 1.28.0, you already can interact with OData v4 services, which is quite great. And I believe that many of you have already used SDK in some projects, and you will feel absolutely at home with OData v4 because I think our developers made a great job unifying and providing a great architecture so that now you can basically see that OData v2 and OData v4 in many senses would be almost the same. So this is like a deep create call in both OData v2 and OData v4 clients. So I think you can, I cannot find the differences. So I think that that's a great code reusability where it needs to be. In other places, of course, because OData v4 specification is much wider, let's say, and more standardized and have additional features, there will be differences, but when you'll have to migrate to OData v4, it won't cause you any brain pains because you'll recognize all the patterns. And it was a quite quick talking. Let's stop talking and hand it over to our great Marika to play around in the IDE with you. Over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, as Artem mentioned, I'm from the development team of the SAP Cloud SDK, and I will now start sharing my screen and will show you some small project that I created to show you some of the advanced features and maybe also some of the easier features. This desktop. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen. Thumbs up if yes. No? Artem, can you see it? Okay, top.
I can see it perfectly. Nice.
Okay, because I don't see the border here. Great. So I have prepared a small service here. This is a very, very simple address book where I can store my friends. This is purely based on my imagination. So I added some names, usernames, first name, last name, and the users or the my friends can also have addresses. So I also have one address, and the address is very, very simple. It's only a city and a country. And this service is based on CDS. So I built this using CAP. And what I want to show you today is how you can make requests against the service using the SDK. I will start with a small recap where I have started, so which I have done before already. You probably have seen it, or most of you probably have seen it, but if you're new, this might still be interesting. So what I did first of all is from the CAP service, I downloaded the service specification, so the metadata. So if you go to the $metadata URL of an OData service, you will get the specification. I downloaded that and generated a client from this, like Artem described before. So this is the very simple specification here, and this is what I'm using for this demo. Now, for the small recap, first of all, what you will see is how a request in general works with the SAP Cloud SDK for JavaScript. And then I will slowly evolve this request and make it a little bit more complex to show you some more of the features that up to a certain point you have known already. Then I will show you the count, which was also mentioned. This is not really an advanced feature, but it took us a long time to finally build it in, so it deserves to be shown at some point. Then I will recap the create. As Artem mentioned, it's exactly the same as OData v2, but I just want to make sure you know that this is possible and what it looks like. It's very simple and it does something very nice. I can then compare it to the update, which is very similar as well, but only works in OData v4. So this is a capability. That is purely available for OData v4. And in the end, what I want to show you is the batch request. This is quite a complex request. So in the end, I hope that you will still be fresh enough to understand that. It's quite difficult to write on your own, but with the SDK, it gets so much easier. So this is something that is very difficult to understand as it is, but it's still also quite complicated to handle with the SDK, some parts of it at least, but this very much depends on what you want to achieve with it. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I said that I generated an OData client here. So this, as I said, the model is very simple and small. So you can see that I have entities that are called address and friend. And for this, I also have some additional files, but I don't want to go into details about that. And address and friend are our friends today. So I'll start from a friend and I now want to just retrieve all my friends. So this request that you've seen before in the Postman here, getting all data now in the code world, basically. How would I do that? I use this entity, the friend entity that I import from my generated service here, the address book service. And I invoke the request builder on top of that. So this is the keyword that you will see for basically every request, because the request builder is the entity or the thing that creates a request for us. And then we create a get all request. And with this, you already have your get all request. This is one of the major concepts, the request builder, and then the request that you can have here. You can usually also configure the request. So there's a lot of things that you can do. You can expand, you can filter, order by, select, skip, top, and so on. But this is nothing that we are going to do today. So I really just want to recap here. If you want to execute this request, you would call execute. This is the method that that allows you to pass a destination, and destination usually, so the most simple destination just contains a URL. And in this case, the URL, as you've seen here, is the localhost with the port here. So this would be the request that I want to execute. And that's how easy it is. Okay, but I don't want to do it like this. So today I want to also show you some stats about the request and what this is about. So I prepared some little script in the bottom here. So I have the get all request that I want to run. I will show you some data about this request, and then I will actually execute it against the destination that we've seen. So this is the same destination here. And I will execute this and show the response as well. If there is one, sometimes in some cases you will not see that. So then let's run this. Okay, this took quite a long time. I don't know why. Let's go from the top. So the stats that I log here is the URL. So you've seen that we executed this part, so these commands, and this produced this URL. So you get all friends, and then also can format them in JSON. So this is because we work with JavaScript or TypeScript below, and then of course you want to parse JSON. For almost all requests that we send, except for the batch in the end, we send the same headers. So just for you to see, the headers that we send here are content type application JSON, because this is all serialized to JSON, and the response is also deserialized from JSON. So we also accept JSON here. Get request doesn't need a request payload, so we leave that out here. And the response body, so this is the data that you saw on Postman before, and this is what I get under the hood basically. And from this, we built an SDK response, and this is what it looks like. You have a list. So this was a get all request. You have a list of friends. Each friend here is an instance of the entity class friend. and it has some data about the friends. So if you go down here, you can also see that this is basically what we talk about when we talk about type safety. So the response now is an array. So let's take a look at the first element, and this now has address, my birthday is old, username, and so on itself. So that's the data that you get. Okay, so so much about the recap, or maybe let's just add one more step to the recap. I'll add a filter to this. So here we have friends filtered. So I'll just add a filter to this just for you to see how a filter looks like. So let's check for friends that have the first name Rebecca, because I have a lot of friends that are called Rebecca. So here, that's how I would construct that. That is Rebecca. Okay. So what I did here is I added the filter keyword, and then based on the friend class, I used the static properties that it provides me. So there's first name, last name, username, and so on for filtering, and then I can call equals or not equals or greater than. So depending on the type of the field here, I can enter something different. So let's run this request just to compare what has changed as opposed to the first one. So now we ran the same request as before, only that we added a filter, and this filter now contains this first name equals Rebecca filter. The headers remained the same, the response is now filtered. We only have 2 friends that have the first name Rebecca, and of course in the SDK world you get the same data, I mean the same structure, only that this is less data. Okay. And so that is for you to see that there are actually two requests or 2 responses, but now I want to count those. And this is the brand new count API that has not been there before. So here I want to count. Of course, it makes sense if you want to count, you can basically count. It makes sense to count collections, right? If you have a lot of friends, then count all of them, or here now filter the friends and count a few of them, or maybe you want to just, so filtering is probably the best option here. You can also reorder them and then filter, but it probably, and then count, but it probably wouldn't make a difference. It shouldn't, at least. So what I have to add here is that. So this keyword, and that's already it. With this you can count, and let's quickly check what this gives us. Yeah, count all friends filtered. And you can see that this gives us, so the request itself contains a count now in here. Headers are the same, no payload, and the response body is 2, and also the response is just a number. So here again, you can see that the type of the response is number. So much for the simple features, I would say. Now let's get to the a little bit more complex features. So you can easily create addresses. So as I said, we have this concept of a request builder. So just as an example, let's start with address this time. And now we want to create the request builder. I want to create an address. So those are the capabilities that you have. You can also delete and get one address or update. But now let's talk about creating an address. If you would create that, you would then leverage the entity builder that we also have. So then you would not test this address. And you would build the address, and you would create. And here in this case, we need address IDs. So let's say, let me just quickly. Yeah, so let's say maybe 100, doesn't matter. I just wanted to check whether I have an address already with this number, but I don't as far as I can see. So you can configure this. Let's say city is London, and country is UK. And then in the end, if I invoke this builder, I built. So this is a little messy. Save, then you can see better. So this is how I would create a create request for addresses. So I invoke the request builder, I use the create function, and I pass whatever I want to create. In this case, this is an address. But let's say, so we're talking about an address book. So it probably makes sense to create the address together with the person that I want to create. So I actually want to create a friend and also create an address for this friend. So let's start from friend, the request builder again, and then we create a friend. Yeah, friend. And this friend has a name. Let's call this friend Patty, and the first name is Patricia, and maybe last name just doesn't matter. Let's leave this out. So, and what I forgot is the build. So in the end, you have to build this, and then you have an entity. So this is how you would just create a friend without address. And now if you want to add the address, it's really as simple as that. You just add the address. You can have multiple addresses per friend. So you can just copy this over here in an array, and this should already be it. So let's assign that to a variable, deep create. Okay. Oops, didn't work. And run this again. Okay, so let's get back to what is happening here. So first of all, the request goes against the friend URL because we created a friend with an address. So this is going against the entity friend. The request headers again are application JSON and application JSON. That doesn't really change here yet. The request payload is the data that I created. So I said I want to have the username Patty, and her first name is Patricia. And she has one address with this ID, this city, and this country. And the response data that I get is as usual, but let's maybe take a look at Postman. So this is the old request. You can see that there is no Patty. I'm telling you, probably I'm scrolling too fast, but it doesn't matter. We will find it right away. So if I go down, I have a new friend now, which is called Patty. The last name is not set, but we have the username Patty here in the address also. So this is linked against each other. There's the city London and the country UK as we set it in the example. So this is basically a recap because I mean, this is no OData v4, but this has been the same and this has been available in OData v2 as well. What is not available in OData v2 is the deep update. And so this just came new in OData v4, and this is also a brand new feature from us that we now created, and it actually is very similar to the deep create. So that's why I'm also gonna copy the code here. Let's maybe take actually that is also okay. I'll configure the, it's update. I configure this request, so I'll keep the name Patty, but I also said that the last name, I forgot the last name, so let's call her Smith, and give her addresses. And in this address, I'll create an address. So maybe she moved for some reason. So she got married to some Smith, and she moved to Bristol. Entity. I still did the create. That's the error here. So actually, what I want to do is update my friend and not create a new friend, right? Okay. It seems like there has been an error, but let me quickly check. Maybe this is also just my broken logging. So let us check the, no, it did not update here. Maybe I did something wrong that I don't see. So let's just try a different one. Let's go to Eddie. It's a different guy in our data. Let's check this one. So Eddie does not have an address. So usually I could also just create an address for him. But so the behavior of the update is if there is nothing in there, it will basically just add an address, right? So it will overwrite the addresses. Let's give this a try. So then he is here in Bristol with country UK, and his name is Eddie. Okay, this is okay. Ah, now I know why it didn't work, because I didn't use the deep update. Okay. Okay, that looks better. So again, here you can see the request payload that we're sending. The URL is friend username Eddie. So this is based on the ID that we added to the request. So if you take a look at the update, you can see that we're not passing it separately. So the username ID or the update ID is on the object itself, and we know internally that this is the ID. So that's how we construct this URL. And based on this, we can then create this URL. Let me quickly check the data here. So Eddie now has an address. Maybe just for my interest, I'll try to do this with Patty again and give her a new name. Last name was Smith. And she moved in together with Eddie, although she has a different name. Okay, that looks better. The data will be similar, so I'll not go into details about this anymore. But now if you go down, you will see that the address has been updated. She now lives in Bristol, UK, and her last name is Smith. Okay, that's great. Okay, I have some more things that I would like to say about the deep update, because this is a quite complex feature, it can become quite complex. I didn't create any slides, but I have some comments that I just want to paste here for you to just reflect about. So the deep updates can be very powerful, and it also exists in different versions. So it also is very unclear or difficult to know in which system has which version. But there are the three first, I would say, features about the update that can be, they can already leverage or can already be leveraged and can already be very powerful. So this is the current scope. I forgot the parentheses here. So creating new linked entities, like we've seen in the case of Eddie, creating a new entity is already possible. Updating linked entities, as we have seen in the case, and there I have to say, this is not really what we have seen, but let's assume that we have seen that in the case of Patty. So we changed her address. There we have the difference. So the SDK implements the version 4.01 of the OData v4 specification, but we're using CDS here, which implements the version 4.00. Therefore, the behavior is slightly different, but as you have seen, you can still use it in many cases, but you cannot leverage all of it. One thing that is currently not yet implemented, but is planned, is linking entities. So making it possible to just link or existing entities to the parent entities. So in this case, you would have an address that already exists and link that address to the friend at hand. And some things that we currently do not plan, but we would of course be very interested in if somebody has plans to work on things like this, or if you have projects where you need this. So we will not build that unless we know that there is a system and somebody out there who uses that, because OData is very it's very feature rich, and sometimes it's very difficult to know whether we should implement things or not. And this currently we don't have a system that that allows us to do these things. Therefore, we're not planning on doing this for now, but this is not out of the world. So these things are deleting linked entities and unlinking existing entities. This is something that the OData specification calls delta changes, if you're familiar with it, but we don't need to go into details about this. Okay, so now I get to the last part, which is also the most complicated part, but also maybe, I don't know, very interesting as far as it's about what is actually happening and what we're actually doing under the hood, because it's quite complex and potentially very useful. So a batch request in OData terms means that you want to create a request in batch mode. So you want to create multiple requests at the same time and get responses at the same time by only leveraging one request. You do that by going through the $batch URL. So the URL looks something like this. That would be the end of it. And this URL goes towards the service. It does not go towards one specific entity, which means you can also execute that against multiple entities of one service. So of course, everything is in one service, but when you do that, you can mix requests between different entities. You have the possibility to create to read data basically, and you also have the possibility to create change sets. A change set means that you have write requests, so you change something in the system, and the requests that you add to a change set are not specified in their order. So that's according to the OData specification. So either all of them go through or all of them fail. So that is what the specification says about that. Let's maybe try to create some of those requests independent of batch first, and check what this would do, or how would we use that, and how we can do this together. So now what I want to do is I want to first of all check what data I have, like I would maybe now do with going to Postman. Then I want to create a few new addresses, and then I want to read the data again to check what the addresses are that I created. Okay, so we've seen the get all request, get all address this time. This is as simple as we've seen on the top. So now we have the address, request builder, and we want to get all. That would be a get all request. Then we want to create create a create request. For this, I will now create a function that I already prepared, because this is actually not worth typing now. I'll also explain it, of course. So let's call this create address function. So this takes an ID for the address, username of a friend. So the ID of the friend basically that it is supposed to be created on, and a city. So that should be enough for the address. I don't want to add countries at the moment. For this, we use the request bit of the create of the address again. Use the create as we've seen before. I tabbed this before. Then here again we pass an address that is built by the builder. So builder address friend username. So all the stuff that is passed here to this function is added here, and this will then return this create request. So if I call this function, it will create me a return request. It will return a create request this way. Okay, then batch request. How do we construct a batch request? For this, we import the batch keyword. Maybe one step back. So this means I now have two requests, or two types of requests that I can use. This is the request itself, and with this I can create new requests. And now what I want to do is I want to, as I said, read data, create some data, and read the data again. So if I now want to enter the batch mode basically and configure a batch request, I just simply import the batch function, and the batch function comes from the service that I generated. So in this case, this is the generated service, As Artem mentioned before, if you use a pre-generated service, you of course you also have this there, and the features are exactly the same, only that you have to install it instead of generating it on your own. And in this batch request, I can pass the get all request, get all address here, and this would already be a valid batch request. I could execute it if I want. So actually, just for fun, just to see that it really is what I'm saying. So I could just get data through a batch request, which of course doesn't make sense because batch is meant to do more than that. I will not show you the payload yet because this will be more interesting when we have some more data in here. So let's create some addresses. But to create addresses, I cannot just pass them to the batch directly because, as I said before, the batch OData specification wants me to create a so-called change set, which contains a set of changes. Well, that's that. So I would again import the change set function, which also comes from the generated service that I have, and into this change set function exactly the same way as I pass it to the batch. I can now pass create requests. Let's pass a few. So I'll use this create address function. So the ID, let's make it 300. And the friend username is Eddie. We've seen Eddie before. And he lives in Rome. It will now be Rome or UK, but it doesn't matter. Just copy that over so we can maybe have 3 different IDs. And then let's, I know that there is a Harry Fox in my friends. There is a Holy Moly. And maybe they just live in Paris and Munich. Okay, and in the end, I want to read the data again. Oops. Okay, so this is now a batch request. As I said, it is already internally quite complex. So if you execute a batch request, it is important for you to know that change sets do not have an order. So the batch commands have an order. The order will be first we make a get all address request. Then we execute the change set, which internally does not have an order. And after that, we execute the get all request again. Let's run this. Okay, let's go from the top again. This is quite interesting. I said already that this is the URL. We're going against the service, and then $batch is where we're going against. This time we have different request headers, and this is also quite relevant. The response or request that we have as a content has the content type multipart mixed, and the response that we expect also has multipart mixed. In OData v4, it is possible to get a response that is JSON, but as we reuse the code that we've used for OData v2, and in OData v2, to my knowledge at least, it is only possible to get a response in multipart mixed. This is important because otherwise we cannot parse the response. But this is nothing that anybody needs to take care of who's using the SDK, because this is done automatically, of course. And then in addition to that, it is also important that in the content type, there is this boundary. So we define a boundary. The number here or the ID is not really important, but it has to match with the request itself. But as I said, this is also done internally. So the batch boundary here that you see is used to separate the request, the sub request that we created within the request. So let's take a look at the request payload. I will tell you some or show you some of the interesting parts. As you can see, it's quite a lot of, let me call it blah blah. So it's a lot of a long string basically, but it's in the end only a serialized batch request. So you can see that this is the string that we've seen here. This is the one that, or this is the boundary of the batch request, and this separates the request in multiple sub requests. the first request we've seen is a get. So this here is the boundary. The first one is the get, and it looks as usual. And maybe let's go from the bottom. The last one is also a get, and it looks the same. So those are the two get requests. And in between, we have the change set. The change set also has its own boundary. So this is defined in the headers of the change set here on top, which is now serialized as a string. And this boundary is then used to separate the sub change set. And here you can see that we have three requests. So the first one is the post, a post that creates an address. This is the data that we sent. So this is Eddie, who lives in Rome, which now is in UK. Then we have the next one, also against the same URL, different data, same URL, different data here. And yeah, this is basically what is created out of what was created. So out of the request that I created here. And in addition to that, of course, we get a response. And the response has a very similar structure. I will run a bit. Oh, address is not a single. There's one thing that I forgot. So the request itself looked okay, or quite okay-ish. One thing that I forgot, the CAP service handles requests differently. So there are different ways of handling this, or parsing, or serializing the requests. In the SDK, the default is the default that you probably find in most examples. But you can also set this to a different URL. So you can set a custom path as a custom sub request path type. Or you can change the path type. And in CAP, it is relative to entity. So this URL that you've seen here, this is the sub URL is relative to the service in this example, but actually the CAP request needs this to be to the entity. So let me just run this again. Okay. So yeah, now I can see that it worked. So to compare here also a get a request, you can see that the address book is address book is not in here anymore. Okay, let's take a short look at the response because we are also almost running out of time. The response now looks like this. So you can see that this is the data that was retrieved. First of all, you can see that here in this, how this is shown, it's 4 lines. We don't want to look at this now too closely because it's just the data that we also can see in the Postman. Then we have the next request, which is part of the change set again. So yeah, as I said, it's quite complicated to read, but if you kind of get into it a bit, this is what it looks like. And luckily, as a user of the SDK, you never have to get into it too much. So yeah, the response code here is 201, and the data created is what you can see here. And then we have this 3 times because those are the 3 change sets. And in the end, we did another request, and here you can see that there are some more lines. So there's more data in it. To just make sure that this is really correct, let's quickly confirm that also here. So you can see that some of the users now have more addresses. So yeah, this was actually created as a new address. Yeah, it was a create, it was not an update. So yeah, you can see that there are, so Harry Fox now has an address, and Holy Moly also has an address. Great. Now, how would you now handle this URL? So you've seen what is happening under the hood, but what is actually happening in your code is maybe also an interesting question. So here you can see we're getting the response, and now I mean, it is much simpler than what you have seen here, but still there are some challenges for us. So it is you need to know what your requests were. You need to be able to understand that the first one was a get request, and that the second one was a change set. And these things, if you know these things, you can handle the response basically. So let's take a look at the response. It is of type batch response array. So it's an array of batch responses. So let's just first of all take a look at the first one, which is a read response. All responses have the is success function that tells me whether this was a 200-ish basically, or if it was something, if this was an error code. If it was an error code, you need to then also yeah, work with errors here. But let's now transform this to a read response, because I know that this is a read response. And when I do that, I can see that there is some more API. So in JavaScript, you would not have to do that. In TypeScript, this is helpful because then you can understand the API here. Yeah, let's go from the bottom. The type here, the type here gives you the constructor of the entity if we were able to parse this from the data. So this is not in the type world. This is in the JavaScript world. You can basically retrieve the constructor and use it to create a new entity out of this. But you don't need to do that. As I will come to this in a second. Let's just quickly go through the rest. So as I said, is success is available for all the types of responses. The HTTP code, of course, to know what this was. The body that is already parsed as JSON. So in this case, it probably would be an array. And this magic as function, and the as function actually provides you the response as the type that you know that it is. So here you can pass a constructor, and you can do this with the one that we've seen here in the type, but it will not be typed. Therefore, I know that this is this was based on the address. So I'll now pass the address here, and let's assign this to something. Get or addresses. So those are the addresses that I got. And here you can see that the type here now is address. Exactly. You can do a similar thing for write responses, of course. Let me quickly go through this. Here I want to go for the change set that I created. And now here, let's assign, so here I know that this was a write response, so or that this was a change set, so I will use the write responses here. And there is no as on this, but instead we have, again, is success, so I can check whether this was an error response or a correct response. And if it was a correct response, then I can parse the responses, and I know that there have to be 3, so I'll check the first one again here in this case. And again, what we've seen before is available to me. So the type, the HTTP code, the parsed body, if there was a body, because in write responses often there is no body at all. And in the end, you can also do the use the as function here, and then pass again address, and this will then give you an address. Yeah, that's that. And I would lead over to the questions, probably.
Yeah, guys, feel free to ask questions if you have any. I'm happy to take them. I already answered some in the chat, but if you have more. So if there are no, maybe we can continue with the remaining parts of our slide. And yeah, thanks Marika a lot. And it's so great to be on your warm-up usually, because it's always an amazing demo. I hope, I mean, guys, you had a very nice pair recording sessions basically. So stay tuned for our next ones. At least I liked it so much. Yeah, and let's draw some conclusions from what we've just seen. And sometimes as a PO, I also can't always catch up with all the great developments that we have. So I also was spectating as you and think that the developments are quite great usually. And actually, and that's where we help you to with the Fluent APIs or for data V2 and V4 client to really have some uniformity with your most advanced features like batch and deep operations, and benefit from the code reusability and quick migration. Also, I I think you've just seen that we have for you data before, like baked and red hot out of the oven with all the most frequent used features available. I posted in the chat a link to our GitHub repository where you can post your feature request in case you still miss something from the OData feature scope, and we usually try to factor it in as soon as we can in our backlog. Also, as you see, we listen to your feedback and even long-lasting feature requests. We satisfied some points just to, you should understand a lot of things fight for the priorities, but we always listen to the customer feedback. And if you provide us with good reasons, we'll always deliver to your expectations. Also, please don't forget to visit our documentation. We now have updates almost instantly for all the features that we release. So check release notes, check the use smart search. It's super helpful. You just type a couple letters and you will be already redirected to the right material, or at least see if the documentation is there on your topic. If you're missing some documentation, please let us know. Again, like the whole team is begging you to provide us some feedback. So take our survey if you can. It helps us a lot to improve. And of course, we are happy to hear from you. Please reach out to us through all the available channels. I shared my email for some requests in the chat, but there is a public one. And of course, our repositories serve as a good source for issues that you have and want to solve, or feature requests that you still might have. And again, thanks Marika for amazing demo. Thank you all guys for joining. It was our pleasure. And we all hope to see you for the next one with some exciting news coming soon. Masha, you can take it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Artem and Marika. The recording of this call will be available in the SAP Community Calls page in a couple of days. Thank you everyone for joining. Bye-bye.